FY22 earnings call of Computer Age Management Services hosted by Kotak Institutional Equities. As a reminder, all participant lines will be in the listen-only mode, and there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions after the presentation concludes. Should you need assistance during the conference call, please signal an operator by pressing star then 0 on your touchtone phone. Please note that this conference is being recorded. I now hand the conference over to Mr. Nischint from Kotak Institutional Equities. Thank you, and over to you, sir.
Good morning. Welcome to the 1Q FY22 earnings conference call of CAMS. To discuss the financial performance and business updates, we have with us this morning Mr. Anuj Kumar, Managing Director, and Mr. Ramcharan S.R., Chief Financial Officer. I will now like to hand over the call to Anuj for his opening comments.
Hi, good morning everyone, and thank you, Nischint. Welcome everyone to this earnings call, the 1Q earnings call of CAMS. And I have here myself, Ramcharan, who's a CFO, and Anish, who's a Investment Services Officer. We've had a satisfactory quarter. You would have seen the results by now. And overall, in our core business in the mutual funds market, all operating metrics seem to have shaped up well in the months of April, May, and June. Although there was an overhang of the second wave of the pandemic, which manifested itself in some contraction in transaction volumes, especially the chargeable paper transactions, and a lot of contraction especially in the month of April and May, in sales and investor interaction activities. I think overall it was a pretty strong quarter. And what I'll do is I'll take you through this presentation. I'll continue calling out the charts just so that you're able to follow the flow. So as you can see from a business continuity perspective, given that the second wave of COVID hit us in April and has pretty much lasted all through the first quarter, we were able to manage the entire rhythm of expanding, working from home, a second round of shutting of some of our front offices. And this time we were a lot more select, but we had to shut those locations which were where the government authorities asked us to shut, or the offices were in containment zones, or our employees' strength was afflicted and therefore we could not open. So it wasn't as bad as 1Q last year, but it was very severe, just taking the intensity of the second wave. Overall, in 1Q, our transaction volumes touched a historic high. So this is the highest number that we've seen ever, of about 87.5 million, out of which over 16 million is investor and distributor initiated transactions. A lot of the others pre-scheduled, pre-ordered kind of transactions like SIPs. H360, which is our distributor utility, we had launched the app in March of 2021. So it had about 10,000 downloads in the Play Store, and registered distributors, the ones who participate, touch 40,000. The account aggregator business, which is still not officially launched, but which is going through almost like a beta phase, is gaining traction. We have 18 FIUs. Those are users who will solicit information for investors and users basis a consent coming from the investor, and then 4 information providers who officially signed up with us. CAMS Pay, which is our payment aggregator services, continued to expand both the product suite and transactions. And transaction volumes for the first time ever crossed 10 million every month. So that was a nice milestone. You're aware that we've been working on the Franklin Templeton transition, where we did the contract signing in July of last year. So we've gone live in the month of July, which was outside the quarter, but still is worthwhile mentioning it here. This was the first instance of significant rebadging of staff that we did in CAMS. and the operations have gone live in Chennai and Hyderabad, and the operations continue to stabilize. We had launched Aadhaar-based eKYC based on OTP. This, was launched sometime in the previous quarter, has now got integrated with multiple digital platforms, mostly of the asset managers, and is helping in a significant way do seamless onboarding of mutual fund customers. MyCAMS as a individual household kind of mutual fund app and utility had crossed 4 million unique investors, touched 4.2. So we saw as investors were slightly constrained in terms of either meeting their advisors or doing anything in the physical world, continued to flock towards digital platforms. MyCAMS was also benefited. And then we saw peak logins, which is instances of individual investors coming in, logging in once or many times in a day across 2.5 lakh. Our CRA business, which was officially announced in March and then subsequently licensed, we continue to work on the product development and progressing well for our end of December kind of a launch. And then as part of the Ease of Doing Business Committee of SEBI, you may have read, a lot of you have read, that a unified platform is now in the design and build phase and will be launched shortly, which will create a unique utility giving the benefit of unified processes across several AMCs or across the entire spectrum of AMCs. And therefore, for an investor to get serviced in various formats on a single platform across a set of mutual fund holdings will become much easier. And this will result in significant ease for the investor, reduction in any operating pain or delays that he goes through, and will elevate the pitch for the entire industry. So those are the key business highlights for the quarter. Chart number 7, I'll cover the Franklin Go Live in brief. As I said, a very large people migration and the single largest migration ever in the mutual fund industry, which was completed in this entire COVID phase. The LOI came to us on 13th, 14th March last year, just prior to COVID. And then we concluded this whole thing at the end of wave 2, went live on 19th of July. So through the onerous, challenging circumstances, we were able to get this entire thing together. The Franklin teams were to be rebadged or brought over in Chennai and Hyderabad. So we set up, although we were present in Hyderabad through our own front office, the branch, but we did not have processing staff, which has now commenced. So we've set up an office there. And just managing significant complexities in terms of processes, design of platforms, practices, systems, data interchange, APIs. There was just a lot of work to be done on all those fronts, and this is despite the fact that we operate, the RTA work, the liability work, operations scope for almost 70% of the industry. We did see that there were some things to be smoothed out as we went live with Franklin. So all of that happened, and very happy to share with you that that's one more very significant addition to the client suite that we built very assiduously over the years. One, please. Just in terms of key metrics and key data, all of you track the industry, so you know a lot of this. I will not go too deep into all of this, but industry AUM, which is the average assets for 1Q at over 33 lakh crore, 33 trillion. CAM service funds, this does not include Franklin yet because all of that happened in July. This is April, May, June averages at 23.1 trillion. And then you can see significant growth, whether it's in overall asset growth for the industry and for the equity segment, and then overall growth for CAM service funds, or as we call it, CAMS industry. Overall growth of assets at over 32% year on year, and about 3.5% over the trailing quarter, which is 4Q of last year. And similarly, expansion of equity assets, very significant deep expansion of almost 46% over last year, and 6.5% in terms of sequential quarters, which is 4Q of last year. All of this resulting into an AUM market share of just under 70%, 69.6, which will be slightly augmented now, and we will report new figures at the end of this quarter after the Franklin addition to the overall suite. Go back. Net equity inflows, which you know were a bit of a concern in the year 2021, remained positive in 1Q. SIP inflows grew, which is a good sign. SIP, by the way, represented a very stable book through every bit of vagary that hit us in 2021, but the inflow growth is very heartening. And then growth in total AUM, as you know, was driven both by equity and debt. Debt also has been at a very even clip, marked by significant deepening of sales in the last 6 months period. In terms of operational metrics, again, I think everything went north. I spoke to you about overall transaction volumes, historic high. We'd never done these volumes earlier, about 87.5 million. 2% quarter-on-quarter expansion, 15% year-on-year. And you will remember that 4Q of last year was also very deep and significant because the markets were returning to normal, including redemptions where HNIs and other categories did book some profits. I think that itself had represented a transaction high, and 1Q was a further growth over that. The SIP book at just short of 230 lakh, about 22.9 million. Again, 15% up year-on-year, very heartening, and 7% quarter-on-quarter. This, I think, is just a very good metric because you know that represents a very stable monthly installment paying part of the franchise, which has chosen to take a long-term view on the industry and are here to save and invest with the industry for many years. Systematic transactions process, this is largely triggers that we do, 10% up year-on-year, 5% quarter-on-quarter. A lot of the new SIP book that you see 15% year-on-year will start getting triggered. It depends upon when they came in. So the transaction growth isn't as fast as the registration growth. That will catch up in 2Q. And then live investor folios expanded to 41.6 million, 5% up year-on-year, 3% quarter-on-quarter. Unique investor service last quarter, I think we reported something like 16.7 million, so almost 17. Again, 6% up year-on-year, 2% quarter-on-quarter. So all of that, I think, is after 5 quarters, just a good sign to see significantly deeper selling activity and customer engagement activity happening in the industry, including in our part of the industry. I will now request Ram Charan to take over from here and go through some of the key financial numbers.
So I will just take you through the broad financial highlights for the quarter. Revenue was at 201.17 crores, which was up 35.4% year-on-year and little less than 1% quarter-on-quarter. The revenue growth was driven by a growth in the MF business. The asset, as you know, the MF business actually has 2 components. One is the AUM-based or asset-based revenue, and second is the non-asset-based revenue. The asset-based revenue grew at 32.7% year-on-year, tracking the growth in the AUM. So the asset-based revenue was at 155 crores and 2.3% quarter-on-quarter. The non-asset-based revenue, which primarily consists of the transaction revenue, some application revenue, call center revenue, and the out-of-pocket expenses reimbursement, that was up 60.5% year-on-year, and it was down 8.5% quarter-on-quarter. If you recollect, the first quarter of last year was when there was a COVID-related lockdown, and hence the transaction came to a grinding halt. So the non-asset-based revenue growth year-on-year is a reflection of the increase in transaction when compared to the earlier quarter. And overall, there has been an increase in the call center and the application revenue. And in terms of the non-MF revenue, there has been a growth of 29% year-on-year, and quarter-on-quarter the growth is 1.4%. The non-MF revenue, as you know, will consist of our AAF business, the the payments business, the insurance business, and some amount of sterling revenue, that is our in-house software development. We do work for some mutual funds on software development. So that was up 29% year-on-year and 1.4% quarter-on-quarter. Just to bear in mind that we voluntarily deselected the banking and NBFC outsourcing business in the course of the last year. So that is kind of not part of these numbers. In terms of the mix, we were seeing in the course of the year a favorable movement in the equity component. Equity, as you will know, is the highest yielding asset in our mix, and this equity component went up 3% year-on-year and 1% quarter-on-quarter. And because of this, although there was a depletion in the yield because of the price, because of a telescopic pricing structure, you will recollect that the increase in the AUM is generally accompanied by a decrease in our fees and yield because of the telescopic price with our customers. So this mix actually ended up mitigating some of that impact, and hence there was, when compared to year-on-year, the yield was a little depleted, but compared to quarter-on-quarter, it was almost the same. In terms of the revenue growth, if you see the growth quarter-on-quarter was a little muted because of two factors. One was there was this price related, telescopic pricing related depletion yield that we generally get. Historically, if you have noted our story, there is always a lag between the pace of growth of AUM and the pace of growth of our fees. It is a combination of various factors, including the pricing discount that kicks in because of certain levels being reached, as well as the mix impact. And traditionally, it's been around 70% of the increase in AUM. So in terms of the revenue for the sequential increase in the revenue, there was a depletion because of this factor, which is the asset growth. Fee growth was around 70% of the growth in AUM. And more importantly, because of the lockdowns that were on and off, localized in the last quarter, the transaction revenue, the paper transaction revenue, to be very precise, took a hit. And that's the reason why the growth in revenue is a little muted quarter on quarter, although the asset-based growth, the fee, track the usual trend in terms of increase when compared to the AUM growth. In terms of the profitability, the PBT, the operating EBITDA for the quarter was at 87.12 crores or 43.3%. This is a non-Ind AS 116 based calculation of EBITDA is 43.3%. This was when compared to 44.9 crores for the Q1 of FY21. That's a growth of a substantial growth over the last quarter, and the sequential EBITDA was 83.56%. In terms of PBT, the quarter ended at 85 crores of PBT, which was up 64% year-on-year. The comparable PBT for Q1 of 2021 was 52 crores and was up 5% quarter-on-quarter. The comparable PBT for last quarter sequentially was 81 crores. In terms of PAT, we entered the quarter at 63.24 crores, which was again up 59% year-on-year and 5% quarter-on-quarter. The comparable numbers for first quarter of 21 was almost 40 crores, and Q4 of 21 was 60 crores. The return on net worth continues to be healthy at 43.3%. You will also have read that the board actually recommended a dividend, first interim dividend of 6.5 rupees a share in its board meeting yesterday. If you look at the margin profile as such, we have been clocking a margin of around 40% over the last few quarters, and there's been a moderate increase in the current quarter. This is also attributable to the reduced revenue from low margin business. As I indicated earlier, the transaction revenue, which is not very accretive from a profit perspective, came down drastically in the last quarter, the paper-based transaction revenue that we gently accrue to our books. And so that kind of had an impact of increasing the margins a little. Overall, it has been a very satisfactory quarter from a margins perspective. PBT, operating EBITDA, and PAT growing healthy when compared to the last year. We also ended the quarter with a healthy cash and cash equivalent of rupees 393 crores. This amount 393 crores excludes the cash that we hold in trust, which is most of an escrow account for our TCS or a stamp duty. So this, in summary, was the financials for the period. There is also in the earnings presentation a trend chart given for the way our revenue has moved over the last 5 quarters, the way our operating EBITDA has moved and PAT has moved and PBT has moved. And you would note that all of that shows a increasing trend. With this, I kind of conclude the presentation regarding the financials. There are detailed financials in the presentation and for you to have a look at and ask any questions. I leave the floor now open for questions.
Thank you very much. We will now begin the question and answer session. Anyone who wishes to ask a question may press star and 1 on the touchtone telephone. If you wish to remove yourself from the question queue, you may press star and 2. Participants are requested to use handsets while asking a question. Ladies and gentlemen, we will wait for a moment while the question queue assembles. Participants, to ask a question, you may press star and 1 now. The first question is from the line of Parth Agarwal from Ladder Up Wealth Management. Please go ahead.
Hi. Thank you for the opportunity. So I have a question regarding business model of CAMS FinServ. So how do you basically make money in this business? Do you charge to financial information users or how is it done?
Yeah, sure. So the way the business is designed, the users will end up paying for these services that they avail. And it is typically, I'm not saying always, but it's typically a per statement download kind of charging. The market is still kind of getting used to what will be the best charging model, but this is the way it is architected right now. It's also predicated on the fact that there will be no charges coming in to us from the providers, and the financial information users will pay the account aggregator or CAMS FinServ on a per download basis.
Okay. And so what is the value proposition for the customers who are actually giving access to all that data? Means other than consolidating all my holdings and financials and everything, is there any other value proposition for the customer?
So that's a big value proposition. That's a big value proposition. From a pure information aggregation perspective, I as a user manage all my assets separately, store them, manage the passwords, etc., and then do the consolidation myself. I don't have a single view. So as a user, I get a single view for a small charge that I pay. And then in terms of other usages, largely from a credit perspective, where a lender uses this information, to create a credit decision and a credit framework upfront, and then he or she can monitor it if I am borrowing the money month on month by drawing that financial information once they have that consent. In any other format, today when I seek a loan, I give all that financial information, and after that, the lender is virtually blind to how things are changing in my life. All of that can go away with the use of this utility.
Right. Okay. And just regarding CAMS Pay, so do you take for generating the revenue, do you take percentage of the transaction value, or is it some flat fee model?
So CAMS Pay works on two revenue models. One is, as you know, there is a registration of the mandate that happens, for which there is a charge, and then there is a per transaction billing also that happens depending on the transactions that are put through the platform.
And that per transaction billing is flat fee or percentage of value?
It's a per transaction fee.
Transaction fee. Okay. Okay, that's all from my side. Just a final question, sir. This 23 trillion includes Franklin 60 to 70,000 crore, right? Whatever you have disclosed in your presentation?
Not yet. These are 1Q numbers. As I said, Franklin operations commenced in July, so it does not include Franklin.
Okay. So it will be included from quarter 2?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yes. Okay. Thank you from my side, and best of luck for the future quarters.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Siddharth Gupta from Voyager Capital. Please go ahead.
Good morning, sir, and congratulations on posting a great set of numbers, sir. So my question is with regard to the fact that you spoke about the revenue mix increasing from non-mutual fund services. But my key question is, what kind of growth is expected from this sector again? Because again, as a stakeholder, I see that the markets have already priced in an almost an unimaginable value growth of the share price in the near future, while we are continuing to grow at a stable rate, which is great, but that is for a mutual fund business. Where do we see our non-mutual fund businesses grow in the near future? Thank you.
So on the non-mutual fund side, you know that the primary contributors of profit have been CAMS Pay and the AIF PMS business. Insurance has been a contributor largely to revenue, not so much to profit. And for the future, we find that CRA will certainly be a very exciting opportunity, although we are about 6 months away from launch, but working very closely with the NPS authorities to design the entire product and do a rollout, and we are assembling the team. And then account aggregator, although the offtake in the market has been slow, it's a brand new model, and therefore will go through a curve of acceptance across all parts of the audience. So those are really the components which will kick in. CRA overall, the marketplace today, our estimate, although there are no published industry numbers, is just short of about 200 crores of industry revenue. So at some point in time, we become eligible to participate in that. Some of that participation will need displacement of incumbents, and some of that will be just new markets that we get into. And account aggregator, there are various estimates that you've been reading in the press and in various industry reports. So that's really how it is. Our endeavor is to push that metric significantly in the coming years from the 10% that we are at right now. And I don't want to strictly start linking it in terms of how analysts are getting to the valuation. That, of course, is their business, and they will continue doing that. But I can give you the details from a business point of view.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Prayesh Jain from Motilal Oswal Financial Services. Please go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, sir. Congratulations on a good set of numbers. Couple of questions. Firstly, on the MF business, when do we come? When do the renegotiations come in with the mutual funds? And how do you see the yields moving per se, not just because of the telescopic pricing, but also with respect to the renegotiations that would happen with the AMC? And secondly, on the account aggregator business, you also mentioned that the customers will also have to pay a charge for a small charge for a single viewing. So is that right understanding that you will have two revenue models? One will be from the somebody like information user, and the other is also the customer who is providing information or is allowing access the information. And thirdly, on the FT thing, with the kind of legal tussle it has been, do you see any incremental costs coming for you with regards to the legal issues that are happening right now? That would be my question.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Jain. So there's a disturbance coming from your line. Request you to mute your line while the management answers your question.
Okay. Prayesh, I'll just take the first question on the MF pricing, and then I request Anush to take the second one. So on the MF pricing, this is a general bilateral agreement, as you know, that we have with customers. So the due date actually falls at different dates. It's not on a particular year. Everything comes for renegotiation. So it's kind of depending on the contract expiry. So it's a normal year, and we expect that the expiry happens, at the end of 2 or 3 years of every customer generally. So that happens. There's nothing extraordinary that we expect from a discount perspective, which will impact the yields unfavorably than what it has in the past. In terms of our expectation of yield, while we will be difficult to predict the future, but the past trends has consistently been that after considering some price reduction, mix impact, and the impact because of the telescopic pricing, we have seen over the last year, for the last 5 and 10 years, that our growth in fees has been around 70% of the growth in AUM. That's after considering the various factors that interplay, including the mix, the negotiations, as well as the telescopic impact. On the second question on AA, I'll probably request Anuj to chip in.
Sure, thanks, Ram. So on the AA, just think of it as the user paying the fee. It's a single payment model. The user could be an individual when we're seeking all this information for personal record keeping. The user could be an NBFC or a bank when they're trying to lend to an individual, but either ways, it is that user, that single entity, that will end up paying the charges. More than that, there are no other revenue streams visible as of now. So that's point number one. Point number two, on Franklin, I think whatever the wind down schemes and other related matters need in terms of handling, that is something that Franklin is doing themselves, and that continues to remain completely their remit and their scope. Of course, the operating part will come to us, which means some of the payment of monies, etc., which is happening, as you know, through SBI Mutual Fund. All that operating part, we will have to step in from time to time. But other than that, every other part of handling the market-facing part of the wind-down schemes, etc., is completely the scope of Franklin. And they continue to stay in charge and manage it independently themselves. Whenever they need any help on the operational side, they will come to us, and we will extend all the help. But there is no change in terms of how all of that will get executed.
Okay. Just a follow-up on the account aggregator. How different is it going to be from the CIBIL score, in the sense that CIBIL score also provides a lot of information to lenders? So how different it's going to be from the CIBIL score? Because any other asset classes that are going to be merged with account aggregator that is not currently prevailed in the CIBIL score?
It's going to be it's complementary to any credit rating score. It's a complementary piece of data. CIBIL score is a score, which is a single number. Financial asset information, by reading one's bank statements, insurance holdings, mutual fund and capital market holdings, is a lot more detailed, dynamic, live, synchronous, in-time kind of data, which obviously will have a lot more value, and in terms of making interpretations and understanding whether the person is creditworthy or not. So it will be read together with the CIBIL score for lenders to come to smarter lending decisions. And like I said, it will be far more real-time and far more vibrant than a single static score.
Thank you so much. I'll come back to it.
Thank you. We would like to remind participants that you may press *1 to ask a question. The next question is from the line of Devesh Agarwal from IIFL Capital. Please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Just wanted to understand, although you touched upon this in your opening remarks, the yield for the mutual fund business has kind of come off by 1% on a quarter-on-quarter basis. Now, I understand with the increase in the AUM, yields are likely to come off. But isn't there any benefit of higher equity component in the AUM? I thought higher equity share should have led to either a flattish kind of a yield.
Okay, so let me take that question. So you are right, there is an increase in the equity component of the mix. So I would split it into three parts. There are three components of what the yield is dependent on. One is the telescopic pricing, which has a direct relationship with the growth in the AUM. Second is the mix part of it, which is what you alluded to in terms of equity, and third is the price negotiation. So if you actually look at it from a volume perspective, there has been a huge growth in the assets, right? So if you look at from a volume perspective, the growth in assets itself will have a depletion in the yield, but it would have been higher if not for the favorable asset mix. So the 70% thumb rule that we spoke about historically is after considering all the three components. Hence, if you see the last quarter on quarter, the asset growth was around 3.4%, and the growth in AUM fees was also tracking that. It was around 2.4%. So there is not an unnatural depletion in yields that we have seen because of the AUM fee. The drop in revenue is more attributable to the fall in the transaction revenue that was attributable to the COVID-related localized lockdowns in the last quarter.
Okay, understood. And secondly, on your non-mutual fund business, if you can give us certain more clarity among the three businesses in terms of their revenue contribution and the margin profiles.
Sure. So as we mentioned, the non-mutual fund includes the AIF, the CAMSPay, which is the ACH Access, the digital, and it includes the repository, which is the insurance business, and there is some amount of our KRA and software business. In terms of contribution, there will be around 25% contribution from our AIF, CAMSPay, insurance, and the software cum KRA business. That's generally the split that we see in the revenue contribution. In terms of margin profile, AIF business margin profile is similar to our MF. It's a similar platform-based revenue that we bill our AIF customers. So margin profile is broadly similar to that of MF. CAMSPay is a higher margin business. It's a decent margin business, not high as MF, but again, it's also seeing some pricing pressures given the competition. But it's a decent margin business. It's although not as high as MF. Repository, there is a challenge in terms of margin. As you know, there's an investment phase. There is necessity for the volumes to pick up for us to see higher margins on the repository. The outsourcing part of it is a low margin business. And so that kind of summarizes the margin profile for the non-MF business. The one other thing I left out was the software business. Software is more of a capital business, but we do some work for the mutual funds on APIs, on websites, etc. So that margin profile is similar to a high margin software business. So this is the summary.
Okay, sir. And so on Franklin migration, would there be any one-time cost that we will be incurring or have incurred?
So the transition is happening as you probably would have read, is happening for the last more than a year. So what we do is, as and when the C team or other costs that we incur, we kind of charge it to the P&L as and when it is incurred. And so there is no special one-time transition cost that we foresee. Apart from obviously the rebadging cost and the employees coming on board would happen in the Q2, but that's part of the revenue that's coming on board also. So one-time transition cost, exceptional cost, we don't expect to see in the coming quarters.
Understood. And our last one, this unified platform that SEBI kind of came up with, if you could throw some more clarity on that and whether we would be required to put any capex for this. Or will this include any regular OPEX? And will there be any contributions from mutual funds, or would there be any revenue stream from this platform for us?
Yeah, sure. So this platform which was announced, both in the press and then you would have seen a circular come out from the regulator, emanates from a committee which was set up for the ease of doing business. Like I said, because the two registrars now almost manage all the 40 plus mutual funds in the back offices, the emerging idea was to unify all service requests for an investor who may have invested in one or two, and there are investors who may have invested in 10 or more funds, to make a single request, let's say for transmission of units, or for change of bank request, or any of these things, and then gradually expanding to other kinds of transactions also. The RTAs have been called upon to build this platform, so we are building it. Right now, Those being built by the two RTAs at largely our own cost, and that's the philosophical position that the industry decided to take, and we are backing it completely. Revenue opportunities will emerge. I think it's too early for me to talk about revenue opportunities, but will emerge from this. But exactly what will they be, and will it be based on transactions, etc., will emerge in the future. But think of it as a great utility, so it will benefit the overall market. I think that's a big positive. It will benefit investors, ease out their lives, and therefore, as a derivative benefit, the participation in mutual funds and investment and exits, etc., will become far easier. As you make that, all markets become more attractive. Secondly, from a overall brand salience perspective, it is accretive for us. And those are the two big advantages, one at the industry level, one at the CAMS brand level, that we are seeking to get out of this. And then over a period of time, I think everything else will follow.
Perfect, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Participants, to ask a question, you may press star and 1 now. The next question is from the line of PK Sarkar, an individual investor. Please go ahead.
First of all, congratulations on the wonderful results. My question is regarding profitability of the different business segments of CAMS, with particular reference to the Franklin Templeton business. And going forward, are deals like Franklin Templeton going to be strategic for the company?
Okay, if I may just understand your question. So your question is on the profitability profile of Franklin Templeton and the part it will play in CAMS going forward. So from Franklin Templeton, sorry?
And the comparison with the profitability of other segments.
So we generally do not provide specific customer-wise profitability or segment-wise profitability, but I will give you broad guidance on this. So Franklin, the migration is happening as we speak, and we are now live on July. So what we expect over the course of the year is that we will kind of have a positive EBITDA or a break-even EBITDA in the course of the year. So initially there will be this settling down and transition and additional cost that we will incur and the rebadging cost. So what we expect over a period of the year is that we will break even or have a small EBITDA positive situation. In terms of comparison with the mutual fund, I think, as I said, we don't give segment-wise comparison, but Franklin is a very strategic acquisition for us in terms of customer, because as you know that Arun was mentioning earlier, this is probably the largest transition that's happened in the RTA space in the recent past and probably ever. And this kind of increases the entire salience, because as you recollect, Franklin was the only in-house RTA for all the mutual funds in India. And the fact that CAMS has been chosen for this transition and Franklin is now a CAMS customer, speaks volumes about our salience as an RTA. So from a strategic perspective, I think it's very, very important for us that this is successful and we are on the right track for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Reminder to the participants, anyone who wishes to ask a question may please press star and 1 at this time. The next question is from the line of Nikhil Agarwal from VT Capital. Please go ahead. Mr. Agarwal, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead with your question.
Yeah, so I wanted to understand, what are your charges? How do you charge? Do you charge on the monthly AUM or on the monthly average assets under management? And secondly, what exactly is your mode? Tomorrow, if some other registrar comes up, first of all, the transition is, I understand that it's difficult to happen, but can that be possible in the near future? Thank you.
Okay, I will answer the first part of it on charging and request Anuj to pitch in on the second question on the modes. So from a charging perspective, see our revenue, there is two components to it on the MF revenue. One is the asset-based revenue and it's a non-asset-based revenue. The asset-based revenue is what you mentioned. We charge on the average AUM at the end of the month based on a specific BIPS. The BIPS rate is as decided with individual customer when we enter into bilateral discussions with them. And this is depending on the asset class, whether it's equity, debt, liquid, or others. And the rates are as defined in the contract, and we charge or we invoice them on a monthly basis based on the average assets under management for that particular period. So this constitutes the major part of the MF revenue. The remaining part of the MF revenue, which is the non-asset-based revenue, has got 4 or 5 components, but the major part of it is the transaction-based revenue. We bill for the paper-based transactions, which happen through our front offices. That is the activity of receiving the papers, scanning it, entering into the system, digitizing it, etc. So there is some compensation that we bill for these activities for paper-based transactions. And then we run some adjunct services like call centers for our customers, and we bill them for that. And then there is the out-of-pocket expenses that we incur in the course of our, discharging our duties as RTA. We incur various expenses on behalf of customers, and contractually we get it reimbursed from them. So this is also part of the non-asset-based revenue in MF. So this is the way the billing happens or the revenue is recognized for the mutual fund space. On the modes and on the possibility of this customers migrating from RTA to another, I think that has been covered, but I would let probably Anuj pitch in on that.
Yes, just so that you understand, the RTA operations are very deeply intermeshed with that of the mutual fund. This is not just providing bodies or people to execute processes, but you know that the entire platform on which the work gets done, the core ERP kind of platform, transaction origination platforms, the industry data bureau, the APIs, web services, the entire CRM platform, all of that is supplied by the RTA, and that's a big chunk of value that the consumer gets. Similarly, all the interlinkages with the 1 lakh sellers, the many banks, the exchanges, depositories, courier companies, payment aggregators, fund accountants, all of that is built by us as the RTA, and the client just comes and plugs into it. And then all the deep, nuanced knowledge of process design, risk management, compliance, reporting, and then operational day-to-day delivery of the hundreds of items that get performed on the liability side operations work, all of that is done by the RTA. It's a deeply knowledge-driven, knowledge-intensive work. It is not like any outsourcing that you commonly see in the markets, even done by big industry leaders, either Indian or global. So if somebody wants to move away from one RTA to another, all of this has to be ripped away, and all of it has to be created from a platform, electronic infrastructure, physical infrastructure, process and design perspective. And while none of that is impossible, it's a very complex, long-drawn task. And for a mature relationship to move from place A to place B, it could easily be a 1 to 1.5 year journey with a lot of challenges and deep commitment of people and, capital and costs, all of this to happen. I think that is the single largest moat that is there in the industry. There are, of course, several others, but just to answer your question, that I think is the largest bit of enduring value, which is not easy for any new person or even an incumbent to copy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We would like to remind participants that you may press star 1 to ask a question. The next question is from the line of Prayesh Jain from Motilal Oswal Financial Services. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi sir. So just from a margin perspective, is it fair to say that we have reported peak margins in Q1 and margins will decline from here on, given that, the share of transaction-based revenues will inch up from Q2 onward with lockdowns opening up? Secondly, FT will start getting integrated, where the costs will come in and the margins will only decline from here on? What would be your sense there?
So, Prayesh, as you know, we would not like to give any forward-looking guidance, but and this also depends on how the assets grow in terms of the non-MF business growth as well as the mix growth. So there are various complex factors that play a part in this, but all things remaining same, obviously the lesser yielding, profit yielding component of the revenue is the transaction revenue. So from that perspective, your conclusion is right. As in, the transaction revenue as such is not very profit accretive for us.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Madhu Gupta from Quantum Asset Management Company. Please go ahead.
Thanks for taking my question. Congratulations for a good set of numbers. Basically, my question is regarding, I just needed a clarification that CAMS has two additional revenue drivers. One is that it has a monopoly over AMC data, and that is utilized to provide analytics services for a fee, which I believe is what is being offered under CAMS Pay. And the second revenue driver is that also AMC has outsourced maintenance of distribution database to CAMS, and for which CAMS receives fees from AMC as well as distributors and AMC. Is that right? I just required a clarification that these are the two additional revenue drivers for CAMS as compared to the peers.
So let me just clarify that as principals, AMCs continue to own their data, and AMFI owns AMFI's data, and CAMS does not own any of that. Nor do we have any arrangement to monetize that in any form or shape. So that's point number one.
Okay.
With AMFI, we have this arrangement to service distributors, manage the ARN issuance and renewal process, and there are lots of related processes to that, but that's the part that we manage for AMFI from a process execution and platform perspective. We don't do anything with AMFI's data. That's AMFI's data. We sell a service and we get some revenue for that, but that's not very large. That's a small piece of revenue. As far as the AMCs are concerned, there is only one format, and I would not like to call it analytics. It's more like business insights, called MFDEX or the MF Data Explorer, which is a you versus industry contrast for Indian mutual funds, because everyone, both CAMS service funds and non-CAMS service funds, pour in data, and we serve it back to them from a you versus industry comparison across key metrics of SIP registrations, net sales, etc. For distributors, clusters of distributors, geographical territory basis. But again, that's a small piece of revenue. We do it mostly as an industry data bureau service, consolidating all of the data in one place and then giving back to the industry in meaningful chunks of business insights. So that's all we do. The ownership of data continues to remain with the principal, and we do not infringe that line ever.
The fee earned is a very small amount from both these services.
Yes, those are small amounts.
Okay. Yeah, that's it from my side. Thanks.
Thank you. The last question is from the line of Dipanjan Ghosh from Kotak. Please go ahead.
Hi, good morning, sir. Just two questions from my side. One is, on this AIF business, could you mention, what sort of proportion of revenues or yields you are getting on the business, and, what is the outlook on that business? And the second is, from the Franklin's acquisition perspective, what is the sort of, back office or front office employees you have kind of planned to add or already added? And what is the, kind of cost increase that you envisage for the, for this particular business? What is the sort of cost increase do you envisage for the overall business?
Okay, Dipanjan, so the first question on AIF. So as I was mentioning, the non-MF business, AIF will have an approximately 25% share of the non-MF business, and non-MF business is around 10% of the overall revenue. So you can do the math. In terms of growth, I think Anuj was mentioning about it in the earlier slides too. So this is a sweet spot. This is a platform-based service that we render to our AIF clients in terms of RTA services. So So this is the market size is not comparable to the MF. It's restricted in terms of size and also in terms of people who will want to outsource this. Given in a lot of AIFs, the number of investors would not justify an outsourcing for their operations, RTA operations. Having said that, this is we are introducing some new products in this line, something about a digital onboarding for PMS and AIF customers, which is seeing a lot of traction in the first few months that we have launched it. This is especially relevant in the pandemic period where people are able to digitally onboard their entire investors, and including integration with they're signing your agreements, getting the forms filled, integrating with your DP, etc. So that product is seeing some traction. So we are very positive on the scope in terms of the AIF business. It has grown at a fair clip over the last few years, and we expect that will sustain. As I said, the only limiting factor for this would be the overall market size not being as high as, say, an MF or other businesses. But for that, I think within that small base, I think we will keep growing at a healthy pace in the next few years.
Sure. And on the expense side for the Franklin?
So Franklin, the arrangement with Franklin is clear. We rebadge or take over their employees of the RTA services, and they have all come on board as a part of CAMS payroll. And so, as I was saying, what we expect is we have onboarded the employees, and the revenues also started coming to CAMS. We expect that over the period of year these things will settle down, but we don't expect a positive EBITDA to emerge in the next quarter or two. Post that, we will see positive EBITDA. So the revenue and the cost should sort of be balanced over the next few quarters. The employees that we are taking over.
Sure. Just to follow up, what will be your AIF AUM as on date? AIF or PMS AUM?
Just give me 1 second.
Sure.
What's the question?
But 2 lakh crore.
Yeah, it was about 2 lakh crores.
Sure. Thanks a lot, and all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. As there are no further questions, I would now like to hand the conference over to Mr. Nischint from Kotak Institutional Equities for closing comments.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We thank the management for providing us an opportunity to host the call. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you. On behalf of Kotak Institutional Equities, that concludes this conference. Thank you for joining us, and you may now disconnect your lines.